All right, cool. So after like an hour of teching and geeking out and talking about random stuff, we're here now with Rob. What's your last name?
Voice.
Voisey.
Yeah.
Rob Voisey. I'm here with Rob Voisey, who is a contemporary musician, composer as well, and has is a founder of 60 by 60 Minutes, and after that, a founder of 15 by 15 as well that followed that show. Can I call it a show? What should we call it?
Sure. Concert series.
Concert series. I like that a lot better. Yeah, there we go. Concert series. So this is the first kind of um, interview podcast that we're having with somebody that will be featured on VCHS later on. So we're very much looking forward to having you there. And I'm very excited to be talking to you. I'm going to be talking about contemporary genres. We're going to be talking about your 60 by 60 and how, that happened and what that means to you, and, all kinds of cool stuff like that. And maybe learn a lot about the world that you live in and um, the musical community that you're very involved in. I think that will be really exciting for us. Um,
Like
so
you're
yeah,
on.
how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing quite good. Yeah, I've been really missing going outside. Honestly, I've
Yeah.
been trying to get a lot of my friends, convince them that that I've been very careful about quarantining and that we should hang out in
It,
person.
yeah. It's tough. I've been home with a 3-year-old and my wife. So
Oh wow.
it's been he's what look, we have to get out every once in a while. So we'll go like to the park and do the whole
You need to get out.
distancing thing and masks. Not that 3-year-olds wear masks very well, but
Hmm.
then you do what we can. So
Yeah.
we've been, so I'm based here in New York City, and I'm actually up in Harlem. So uh,
How populated is that area?
it's it's in Manhattan,
Hmm.
but it's probably the most populated area of Manhattan.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty
So.
sure. So we've got, anyway. There's a kind of a high rate going. There's a high rate here.
Oh yeah, New York is the worst right now, right? It's always been leading in everything
New York
with
has been the
coronavirus.
worst, and we've been like shut down. Well, not quite the longest, but pretty long.
That's so
You know,
unfortunate, 2020. I was like planning 2020, like I'm gonna make so many changes. My life is gonna be, I'm gonna be so efficient and productive, and then
yeah.
life throws this giant curveball.
I mean, it's what can you do? I've been in New York for this 9/11, and the .com crash, which is kind of a crazy thing, and so like a couple of other stuff with like the lights out and whatever.
Mm,
Yeah, what do you do? It's these things happen.
yeah.
You get through it.
Tell me about your coming up as a musician and how did your journey go to now?
Right. So the um my parents were accountants. I was I grew up as a hacker. I was kind of a big like kind of geek. Nerds are kind of popular now, but I grew up when
They were
nerds.
not back then. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
they were not. They
Jocks
were.
all the way, ruling the
Yeah,
schools.
it was. You didn't want to be a nerd, and I definitely, I try to be cool.
Okay.
I will, yeah. I'm still not cool.
And why music?
My wife is, yeah. And then, so yeah, um, I always sang. That was just a thing that I did, and I always, like, when I was uh, working with computers, I did a lot of sound stuff, programs. Now, when I look back at it, I realized that they were kind of sound experimentations, even composition. Some were pretty much that complicated. Uh, I went to Stony Brook University. I was double majoring in computer science and mathematics, and double minoring in music and art. And
Wow.
yeah, yeah,
Holy crap.
yeah, I
Okay.
did a lot. And I took a class, composition for non-majors, which is only a class that they give in Stony Brook. But
Okay.
and I met my composition teacher, and I traveled to Israel to study composition. He loved my stuff.
I would think that like contemporary music is not something that just shows up in your Google search all the time, right?
Well,
That's what makes
so
me curious about like how that came around.
2001: A Space Odyssey.
Okay, and that music was intriguing.
Which is so when that I saw that movie when I was 4 or 5,
Hmm.
and I watched it over and over again. And the kindergarten had a record of it. The record is everybody knows what records are. It's 8 tracks that nobody knows. But the yeah, so when I finished my work, I was allowed to go and listen to that record, and
Hmm.
I dug the needle into it. Like that was I just kept playing it over and over and over and over again.
And when
So
was your first composition? When was like one that was like finished enough that you would maybe be able to show somebody?
college,
College. Okay.
yeah. So that's a great example of like. Did I say that I kind of have an atraditional or untraditional composition career? It's so I mean I was obviously drawn
We're
to
finding that out as we're going with these. I'm
uh,
starting to detective my way through this.
so like for sure like from 2001 I loved all of those works. Gotcha. Now better.
Now it's perfect. Now I
Yeah,
can hear
yeah, yeah,
everything.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So
Hey,
you want to know what? Hey, it's for future reference. You want to know what that is?
what is
I
it?
was using the iPhone earbuds, so it must have been the speaker here because this one doesn't have a.
Oh yeah. I was thinking about that too. I was like, are you gonna plug in ones that are gonna just be like, nope, you're not using that mic anymore. That very nice sounding voice. I really like keeping that. All right, so it's gonna be this really interesting transition of audio levels and
Yeah.
angles throughout this podcast. We're just gonna
Yeah.
completely ignore that. And just keep moving forward.
Keep it. Just all you have to do is put a cool filter on it, and it's all good. Yeah. So
Sure.
so that was the deal. I was obviously drawn to contemporary music and classical music and and romantic music from the very start, without anybody sort of introducing it. Well, I mean, the
Did you?
introduction was seeing
Yeah.
the space show.
So did you play instruments like in a band and things like that when you were
I
starting?
I I was a singer, and
Singer, right? Okay.
I did a lot of. I was that kid that would like sit there and like hum and try to figure out like and when I was like 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever I was playing with uh, uh, the overtones in a voice like to make throat singing and
Yeah,
doing all that. I
that
didn't know
stuff's
what
really
it
cool.
was. Yeah, it's fun and like I said, I've been doing it a long time. So
Yeah, I get that. I had a like perfect pitch, I think, pretty early on, and I maybe my whole life ish, because I was studying some of it as well. I think my mom threw me into ear training, so like I would always be like trying to push my voice around and hum, melodies and trying to like, I don't know. I was just intrigued with that as well. So I
right,
totally
well,
that's totally normal for musicians.
I think so. I remember talking to a couple composers talking about like the first instruments, right? And voice and percussion are like the first instruments, and they're the ones that we are most intimate with, whether we're good at it or not. We all understand like percussion and like rhythm and how that's going and voice and
And
tone.
look at us now. Pop
well,
culture.
then, and then, yeah, exactly. And then it
Bass,
goes on.
vocal. Still the root after thousands and thousands of years before even recordings.
So yeah, so anyway, and
Yeah.
that was the thing, so I played violin for a while.
Oh.
I didn't practice, so I I have a
Mhm.
rudimentary learning of that. I always loved singing the most, and when I got to college, I would sing in operas and the choirs and things, and did that, and did
Did
all
you
the
did you
rudimentary.
did you find any teachers or like classmates that were like in on this? Like they were also maybe interested in this kind of stuff you were doing, or was this kind of a solo endeavor that you just?
Uh, yeah, no, I didn't really connect with anybody as far as
Mhm.
that goes. My the first real connection that I had as far as like um, well, I guess it was in Stony Brook, and there was a couple of composition teachers. Like I said, the one that invited me to go to Israel, and then there was another where I took a contemporary composition, not a contemporary music history class,
Mhm.
where that's where I was introduced to Cage and Barrio and Berlioz and all of that, like the music of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, of which really turned me on. That was like an opening of where I was just like, oh, I'm really interested in doing this. I was a big computer science major, and back then, like, anyway, this was the late '80s, and the Stony Brook was focused on a couple of different things, and one was graphics. So now, like, today, people think about graphics and graphic engines and
Mhm.
all these cool things they do with gaming.
Right.
Well, I was at when they first when they were first talking about how to add shading to
Mhm.
like a sphere. That was the stuff we were doing in Prologue and C and Assembler. We were designing screensavers. That's I mean just like and so anyway, all this effort was getting put into graphics, and I was just like, well, there's no effort being put into music. So
Mhm.
that's where I was like looking to sort of like, oh well, this might be a great place to pioneer. Um, and that's why I took the composition class for non-majors, and I tried to do some other crossover stuff, but it didn't matter because I went to Israel and I spent 2 years uh, learning music composition there,
Mhm.
which was, I mean, I found my calling.
Okay.
That was when I went to Israel. I abandoned computers. I said I wasn't going to use any more computers. I'm going to learn to just write scores by hand. I'm going to learn all the music. No, 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 no computers. Um, when I got to Brooklyn College and I got into their program and I was doing some things, I sort of was re-exposed to like Kima and Pro Tools and
Mhm.
digital processing and and like analog processing through all that stuff.
Okay. You want to
And
wait for that siren, maybe?
uh,
Wait for the siren, maybe. We
well,
can.
welcome New York City.
Yeah, New
Uh,
York.
yeah.
Every 5 minutes. Oh,
So
it's good. It's good.
yeah.
And so that kind
So
of dragged you back into it because it offered more options for you around what you were doing, or was I
um,
guess?
I don't know if I would say it offered options. Electronic music is like painting. You create a solid piece of work that's finished. It
Hmm.
doesn't change. It doesn't really, mold into different places and so forth. Where chamber music or live music or stuff that's performed live
Yeah, because
is
once you make a change, it's like a painting stroke. There it is. Now it's on the painting,
now
and
it's
then
there.
that's it. It's not going to move around, or you know, it's not like a water flowing or changing anything.
Right. And when I write a chamber composition, as especially my works when I'm writing, um, uh, there's always the interpretation of the performer. Always. Many times performers are like, "Well, how do you want it?" I'm like, "I wrote it. I wrote it. How do you hear? Like, what do you want to do? If there's something that's wrong, I'll, that's different. You play what's on the page. But I've even had like I one of my works where there was this cellist, and he literally at the end added a whole extra note, like a half note extra note, but it sounded awesome. And like I get it, he was feeling it, and that note was there, and it sounded great. And everybody's like, "We can cut it." I'm like, "No, that's his interpretation."
Yeah,
Everybody's like, "Are you going to
I think
change
that's
the
very
piece?"
cool. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, "No, I'm not going to change the piece. The piece is as it is." But you know, uh, that's for me, live music is fluid, but
Mhm.
electronic music is not.
Yeah, and I think that's very cool actually, because I was recently. This is a little off topic, but I love watching shows, and there was a YouTuber that was discussing a show in depth and things about writing and what the show kind of taught about writing, literature and things like that, and just plot and developing that stuff. And something that's interesting. There's two kind of ways. Like um, there's two types of writing. I don't remember the exact terms, but one is in the sense of where there's posed a question or a problem, and then the writing explains that problem and resolves it for you
Right,
and tells you what the interpretation is. And then there's sort of ways of writing and composition of things where it creates ambiguity, it creates a question, but the answer is ambiguous enough that there can be multiple interpretations depending on the perception and the type of person that you might be or how you want to interpret it, and all of those interpretations are valid and supposed to be existing at the same
right,
time, kind of like in harmony.
right.
So I think that's kind of like also really interesting about the difference
Absolutely,
there.
and I think in just commenting on that, it's just like there's that doesn't mean that's like free, right? It's when as a creator, just because there can be multiple um, interpretations or viewpoints, there's still a thread that's going through, right? I mean, that's the like I do a lot of graphic notation, and it's always interesting. Every once in a while, you can tell the musicians who get it and don't get it. Like um, it's even though it's just a different type of notation,
Sure.
and you're still trying to make a type of music with it, and it's trying to explain something, and there's more freedom to interpret it in different ways.
How you got into music, then what happened? How did you get to 60 by 60?
Right. Well, um, so I was in Israel, and I came to New York, and uh, you know, New York is a tough place, and I
Oh
wasn't
yeah.
really finding a place to get my music performed. So that's when I started Composer's Voice, which we'll talk more about later. And I'd done that for a while, and
Well,
um,
tell me about it. Let's go with it. What is Composer's Voice?
it just started out as being well, I started Vox Novus, right? And so basically, like I
And
said,
that's the shirt. Is that the shirt?
that's a shirt, yeah.
All
And
right, let's see the shirt. There it is.
15. This shirt is actually now 5 years old. So Vox Novus is 20 years old right now. We started it
Woo!
in 1999, or yeah, 2000 actually. The the so uh, I started Vox Novus, and like I said, I'm the son of two accountants. So the whole idea was to start a company in order to have tax write-offs, and like to you're spending all this money trying to get a career, might as well get some sort of benefit from it.
Hmm.
And so I started this and started a website because I could, because like I said, I was a programmer, and you know, it's I mean, so I started the website in 1999. Just to give you an example, I mean, this is before, it's before Facebook, before MySpace, before Hotmail, just to, you know.
AOL times.
Yeah, it was AOL.
I do remember AOL.
So that was kind of like some people had like profiles on AOL, and that was like their profile on the web. And so anyway, so I started doing it for myself and started like, what am I going to do to produce a concert and this and that. And I realized that there were like 3, 4, 5 of my buddies that were in the same boat as I was. So I just figured, why not just pool our resources together and we'll just do one big concert. And we did a few of those, and then like we called it a composer's voice because I figured a series, and the idea was to feature one composer and then have other pieces from different composers that complemented and contrasted against the featured composer. And we did that series for a while, and we would, by hook or by crook, we'd get musicians and they would learn our music, and we'd try to get a venue and we'd do that, and we did that for a while, and it was great.
And during this, what were you doing with school, or like what were you doing with your?
I was in grad school at Brooklyn College. So 60 by 60 is an all electronic project. So the
all online.
No.
Or all electronic? What does that mean?
It was a specifically designed concert performance project. And what I was noticing was that all my electronic composer colleagues, they didn't have a venue, and people weren't hearing their music, and there was this like really vast field of aesthetics and styles and methods and so forth. So I was like, well, how do I present this to people? And there was a couple of problems. The one was the composer applauding for his own piece, and I don't know how many electronic concerts you've gone to, but like usually you're in a theater or a concert hall, and there's 2 big giant speakers. Now sometimes there's surround sound, which is cool, but basically the giant speakers.
Right.
It's dark.
Mm-hmm.
There could be anywhere between like 5 or 10 people to, let's say, a couple hundred, and you're all sitting there in the dark, and there's this piece that's playing. That's most of the time nobody's heard it before this piece because it's usually a debut, and especially like general audiences, not composers or musicians per se, but just general audiences, they don't have a sort of background in this music. They don't have a knowledge of how it progresses or how it develops.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, the piece ends for some determined time, and it's not the 3-minute pop song, so it could be like 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes in, and then there's this awkward silence at the end.
And it's like, that was it? Yeah.
And all of a sudden the composer starts applauding for his own piece to signify the end, right? And then everybody applauds, right?
Okay.
But I was just like, that's so you don't want to do that to your audience. That was one of my things. And then the other thing is like, again, that indeterminate amount of time where you're introducing basically a foreign piece of music to the audience, and it may not be their aesthetic. So if it's 10 or 12 minutes long, that's a tough sell.
Yeah.
And what I found is, like, I would go to these concerts and bring my friends and family and this and that and the other thing, and then afterwards they're like, dude, I love your music, but I can't go to any of these concerts. And that was it. It would turn them off. So I was just thinking, well, what's the solution? So there we go. Each piece is 1 minute or less, but no matter what, the clock dictates when the pieces start and stops. So there's a huge clock on stage. Everybody knows they're going to get 60 pieces. So, and when I started a project, I would tell them, I guarantee you're going to love a piece, and I guarantee you're going to hate a piece, because that's everything that's out there. It's every single aesthetic. You know what I mean? There's just as much as I can cram into 60, as 60 different guys that I can get, girls, whatever. We're going to do, and and so the idea was just to promote and present as much as I could, in an hour, which I felt was like a short concert, and that everybody would enjoy, and I could get more audiences for it.
Yeah, and I think that's really a genius way of promoting the music in a way that people can digest. I guess one of the issues was digestion, right? If you aren't into the first minute of it, that person is going to be not into the rest of it probably, and on just on its own, I think it is difficult. Like you're saying, it was difficult to sell out the audience. I feel also that it's sometimes difficult for me to know if I'm going to like a piece, or like down the road as I'm listening to it, or like it's hard to know how I'm gonna make my choices of preference. And if I were to go to a concert like that, I would easily be able to pin out, okay, I like this, I don't like that, and it's like whatever I like, I can go and find out maybe more about it. Maybe I can go to an actual full concert of it. And this is, I think, a perfect place for somebody to go if they wanted to find out about the contemporary styles and to kind of be exposed to everything, and kind of get in that door and get in that big room.
Well, that was the funny. So there were some unexpected things that came from 60 by 60, and one was the scorecard. I didn't realize that audience members would be sitting there, literally, deep checking the ones they loved, and that they were going to follow up later. That was literally audiences all over almost all the concerts. Like, that was just a phenomenon. If they had a program, they were they could get a pen or whatever, and they would like mark things that they definitely liked and would follow up and ask me about it, and afterwards it was great. So I used to tell composers, just like, write 60 seconds for this, because whether you get in or not or whatever or so forth, it's just a great way for your experiment or not experiment, or to show like a signature piece of like what's your style or your thing. Mm-hmm. And if it gets picked, like who knows where it'll come from. And and the pieces have traveled and aged, so it's like it's always great to see like these 60/60 works like pop up in different places. And so first of all, being part of like a judging session for 60 by 60 is a unique experience onto its own. We get
I wanted to actually talk about that. Yeah, so let's get into that in a kind of chronological manner.
So first of all, 60 by 60 was free to submit.
Free to submit.
Always, yeah. So that was the thing, just send your piece. What's there to lose? Nothing. Your time.
Only to gain.
If you're a composer that cries about making a 60-second piece, I don't know how to help you.
Yeah.
It's, I get it. There were some composers that.
I mean, think about today.
A lot of time.
Most of the audiences out there today, they make up their mind about watching a video or listening to a certain piece based on the first minute. It is just the reality of today.
It's just the reality of it. So you know what I mean? Like, so that's it. So this was that project, and then so we would get anywhere. The first year, we received 180 pieces, and then on average, we got about 600 pieces.
Wow.
Largest year, we got something like 1,200.
Nice. And I also wanted to just throw in there that we talked at one point before, I remember, and I really liked how we talked about it as a buffet style of a concert or performance where you can try everything, and
Yeah.
it's I think that's a very interesting approach to a concert format.
Yeah, and right.
So like the questions I guess in the list is like, how much music did you have to sort through when choosing pieces for the shows, and the concerts, and how did you do it? So
So
there
yeah,
you go.
great. So and when you're half to thin, let's say 1,200 submissions, it's just a process. I always listen to everything once, and I'm usually the first filter, and I'm the first filter because I'm very lenient and I don't want to cut anything. But some people send
I totally get that.
Yeah, but some people send 3-minute long pieces.
Mhm.
That's out. It's got to be 60 seconds or less.
Oh wow! So they have to submit a minute. You're not gonna
Yes,
be like, what's the best minute in this? It's
1 minute or less. No excerpts.
so it has to be a completed
Complete.
delivery.
Yes, it can't. Look, if you can fake the fade in and out, that's fine. But if it's if it sounds like an excerpt, or if it's written in the title that it's an excerpt, you're out. That's those are anyway. You don't follow the rules, you don't play the game.
Okay.
It literally, um, in the beginning, like I said, it was an electronic project, so I was kind of trying to stay completely. It was supposed to be an electronic project, so it was using computers, using digital processing, using like analog processing. But with that said, somebody brought up the audio recording, like there's sound recordings, and
Of non-digital music, right?
well, it could. I mean, like a sound walk. Is a sound walk like an electronic performance? It is kind of right because yeah, sure you can.
What is a sound walk? I don't
Oh,
actually
a
know.
sound walk is taking a microphone and like walking down the streets of New York.
Okay.
And so you're just listening to all the sounds, or one
Like
of my
that
favorite.
movie with the kid who was like the conductor, right? We'll
But
plug it in.
that's
We'll plug it in. But that's
that's a
the
great
one where
example.
he hears the trains. He's hearing all the that kind of like
One
atmosphere.
one one of my favorite composers, Danae Lockwood. So she does these sound maps of rivers. She did the Danube and the Hudson, where she's actually just going from the source to the
Oh, I think
mouth
I've
of the
heard the
river.
word sound map. I've definitely heard
Yeah,
that word. So
and she
sound walk,
just
sound map, similar. Okay.
yeah, same thing. And she's just like recording, going down like all the different like aspects of and you're listening to the river like change and move and breathe. And there, so some people were like, "What about that?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, that works. I mean, right? Because it's really, it's, it's, it's,
Because it's all about inclusivity, right? It's all about these very
well, yeah.
wide.
In the end, that's it. It's about inclusivity. I wasn't looking to exclude people. So if you
Mhm.
had a legitimate, like argument for this is electronic because, and then that kind of just opened everything where, so yeah, if you have even if it's a recording of um, an acoustic instrument, right? I mean, think about it. Like all of pop. Like, sure, you can hear it live, but it's not the album version, right? That's a
Right.
solid piece.
The
So
album
that's
version is really specific on how they want it to sound.
it's specific. So then I was just like, okay, yeah, that wins. So it really opened up the thing. With that said, still stuff like a MIDI realization that's not it. Because it's unless they're like again, I've had people argue for it, but it's like I said, it has to stand on its own as the recording. So that was it, and that was the thing. So anyway, so that's the first process, right? That's so you listen. I listened to 1,200 pieces. The selection process was complicated. So we would take 1,000. I would go through the first thing and just weed out anything that didn't follow the rules.
Sure.
Then we would add 3 or 4 selection panels, go through, and I mean, some pieces are better than others. It's just that simple.
So yeah, so let's talk about the better than others and just a little bit about this. I don't want to, of course, it's about inclusion. So, but you also have to make a decision on what you think would be the best to present to an audience that would watch this, that would listen to this kind of stuff. So my question would be, first I want to ask is, based on hearing so many different kinds of pieces, right? And a lot of these pieces are being written in the day and age that, within the year that you're in and all of this kind of stuff, a very recent music. What would you say are different genres within this contemporary world? Because let's talk about this, right? You mentioned at one point that after World War II, a lot of things started to change, and I feel like I'll talk about myself. Like I am a classically trained violinist, and then I went to Juilliard. Like my path was very different from yours. And from what I know, I mean, I did chamber music, orchestra, all kinds of things, music festivals, but they were all contained within the genre of classical. Everything was focused around that. And really, the only thing that was exposure to this contemporary genre was, knowing about Shostakovich and sometimes competitions requiring 20th or 21st century music, to be performed. So that was really the only kind of avenue and branch out, call it a kind of like olive branch to that world. But definitely not enough to know what was going on in after Prokofiev. so, so tell me about that and how much you know about this, because you are really involved in that world. So it would be curious to kind of talk about that. Like if I am somebody who has no idea, how would you tell me about this?
Well, I mean, first,
something more simplified.
I mean, when I have to talk to someone who basically like is not, they don't know the field at all, right? They're just like, I just say it's movie music. Whatever you hear like in the background that's happening in movies, that's what we do. Because I think or computer computer games, both those.
So those would be the ones that are on the front. You hear those all the time, for sure.
Yeah,
but there's a ton of stuff that's been done that isn't necessarily isn't a more like niche community.
Right. Well, I would just say that those particular avenues that people listen to music is the freest and the most open for contemporary composers to have a voice in. And so you're asking about like, what does it sound like, or genres and so forth. So just to
and how would you genreify the submissions that you had as well?
I can't. And the thing is, it's like there's ambient and noise and 12 tone and neoclassical and neo-romantic and what do they call it? Spectral music, and there's sound maps and soundscapes. There's computer music, music concrete, or samples.
I actually know most of these. I actually have heard of most of these, and I know a little bit about this kind of stuff. Some of it takes, math and like figuring out like an equation that will generate random notes, and then it plays a piece, and every time you play through it, C sound maybe you constantly changes. Like I've actually talked to a good bit of contemporary composers and have heard about all these kind of things. And, some pieces are taking samples from the world outside and then collaging it together and finding different interesting ways to do that. And then 12 tone, right, of course.
The point is 60 by 60. Now, obviously, I can't feature everything in 1 hour because there's only 60. And there are more aesthetics than there is time to play it. But over the years, we've promoted over 2,500 composers. So, thank you. And, we've had like 50 mixes. There's, we've covered most, if not every genre. Even like, they like glitch. I forgot about glitch, and there's that, and like that one second piece that was or someone sent me a piece that it sounded like there wasn't anything there, but I knew there was. Like, it was like one of those, and then all of a sudden I realized it, and they were using all tones that are beyond like our
Hearing range, right?
our hearing range. So that's a
So
style of
I have an interesting question. So, like, what is so you have a lot of this kind of background, that kind of stuff. So, what do you think when I say the example of like the student that comes up, right? There's students that bring all these different, say, different artworks in art class, and then one student comes up with a page and it's a blank page, and the teacher says you didn't do anything, and he says, oh no, it's a white polar bear in a snowstorm. So how would you react to that and talk about how that relates to like interpretation and maybe on a deep
so,
let's get deep on that as an
yeah.
image.
So it always reminds me of one year we got a whole bunch of noise pieces,
Mm.
and so just anyway, I've heard a lot of noise pieces, and so we
Yeah,
got
and
like
to
five.
clarify for people maybe that are watching, noise is not the opposite of music or whatever or sound. It's actually a just description of of a type of music that can be
Right.
genreified.
Basically, people are taking chaotic sound that's randomized. Most of the time, there's a random factor in noise,
Mm.
um, and they present it and sculpt it.
Yeah,
And
there
then
is a message there. It's not. It's just it's organized, and that's what makes it music.
right,
Because some people think, oh, like in a very common language, noise means oh, it sounds so bad, right? That's not actually what we're talking about at all.
right, exactly.
So
It's
okay,
I mean
just wanted to
it's
clarify that.
yeah, yeah. It's an aesthetic, and in these submissions that we got, um, some were more complicated and some were less complicated. And uh, when two of the pieces that I heard was white noise and pink noise. And like white noise is literally like white noise comes the term comes from like snow on a TV. Where analog snow where it's just going.
Yeah.
And it looks like snow, and they call it white noise because it's got it. And then pink noise is like it's got a specific like tone or bent to it. Let's just say. And then there was people that were using random uh, sounds to create like crackling and stuff like that and so forth. Um,
Almost like a kind of more abstract branch from what we call today ASMR.
you're right.
I
Yeah,
would think
absolutely.
that's
And
what
and
makes me think of as Curly. Yeah.
right. And then the last composer is Maggie Payne, and she's a composer from Mills College. She's a master at what she does, and she does a lot of noise compositions, and she really sculpts things. And so we're going through the judging session,
Mm.
and in general, people shy away from noise pieces. Okay, so they did all the noise pieces did really poorly in our judging session. And then when it was all done, there's we once the pieces have all been kind of uh, weeded out is not the right word, but like I said, some are better than others and so forth.
Sorted
You
for
know,
like the performance, right?
right? This is like going for the performance, and then like So I listen to everything in the beginning, and then I'm like really involved in the last stage where I'm looking at. There's two types of pieces that I want everybody to overlook. I
So
mean,
so to look at, right?
to
So
look at over again.
I was gonna say how much of like that final process, if you're not sure what you want to put out there, do you sometimes contact the composer and discuss with them,
No,
or you just make it all internally,
no,
decisions on what's going to be on air?
yeah, it's yeah, no, it's we're the yeah the it's
I guess it's a kind of
the
stupid
person
question.
who's creating the mix. The final mix is
Uh-huh.
60.
Okay.
It's kind of he's the last thing, and but so as the producer of all of this, pieces that first anything that scores high is obviously going to get into the like the final round, right? And then there's like pieces that either score um, Well, they usually don't score the worst. Pieces that score badly usually means they're just not liked. You know, not every piece is liked, not every piece is great. But there's some pieces that polarize, and noise pieces are one of those where there's usually someone like me or another composer
Mm-hmm.
who's very familiar with noise pieces. So when they hear a noise piece, it's very different from everything else. So they score it super high. Um, so I look for those pieces to get like we usually have a score from 1 to 10. So those pieces get zeros and tens, right? So I try to
Love it
keep
or hate it.
those as
That's the way it
yeah,
is with these
exactly.
things. Yeah.
And those pieces are so I kept a bunch of those and all these noise pieces together. There was 5 of them this one year. And for this last panel, I said, I want you guys to hear these pieces. They all scored low, but I want to hear you what you think. By the way, this is all going back to the white polar bear, in the thing. But
All right.
so they listened to all the pieces, and every in this particular panel, everybody scored high for Maggie Payne because she really made this masterwork of sound noise that was just beautiful compared to the white noise piece. And the white noise piece, literally, like I said, it's basically it was done by I know it as a white noise generator, and just for literally 60 seconds long, period, done, like start to finish, just thing. And so, really, what I was explaining is, it's just it's like a one note piece. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does
Okay.
that make sense?
One note
It's just,
piece. Okay.
which is fine. Like, there's an aesthetic for that. But I was just like, when you're comparing these aesthetics, well, it's only one aesthetic, right? It's all noise. But you're comparing a one note piece to a sculpted sound piece.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
All of a sudden, everybody in the room was just like, "Oh yeah, this is actually a masterwork." They didn't hear how great it was because when they were, like I said, people gravitate to tones and music and tonality and so forth. So when they hear a sound, a noise piece, literally they just think noise at first.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where, like, when you're talking about, well, in aesthetics and like this kid that submits the blank paper,
Yeah.
the truth of the matter is, how much did he, how much thought did he really put into that piece? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like a one note piece. It's like, it's fine.
How you get to that piece is really, I think, a big part of it, right?
It is, and you see the people, the look. I mean, white on white canvas, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
an aesthetic. I mean, there's a lot of artists that do it, and some are is fantastic, and some is not. But and so that's the thing that, like, I try to tell everybody is that one thing is aesthetic, and the other thing is like quality. Um, Not every piece is good, but every aesthetic is valid.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, and this topic is really intriguing. Honestly, this topic you can go on forever about this stuff because it's such a
Sure.
in a way it plays a lot with mystery, right? Because the more ambiguous you go, the more things are up to us, the listeners, the people who are watching or are trying to decode it. Some people have a lot of fun with, why are mysteries exciting? Because you can start to hunt for the details, hunt for these different things, or in this case, it would be interpretations, and then
Right.
you can kind of derive different ways of understanding it or connecting with it. And I think that can be very intriguing. And the more the composer thinks about it, the more chances there are going to be. I feel like generally that you will find something that that you'll connect with.
Yeah, and that's so, and to like maybe wrap up the whole uh, judging thing. So
Sure.
in the end, all the judging sessions get down to about 100 pieces, and then out of that 100, um, a like the music coordinator of the project. It used to be always I started doing all the mixes, and I was the guy who made the final selection for the 60 in the beginning. As the project got bigger, uh, we branched out to different mixes and different things. So it could be more than just me. So there would be another guy that he would like, some had like the Canadian mix had like huge amounts, and he had a whole team that brought it down. Or like I would just have that like pool to give to people. That's like I said, the usually around 100 is the place, and then you make your mix of which that's where you're talking about like you find different things. And I always used to tell composers, it's like we're not picking the best of the best of the best of the best. We got the 60 best like super pieces that we're putting together. We're creating an hour of music, and that music has to be curated.
I like that way of putting it.
There's a journey that happens from minute 1 to minute 60, and that's where the music coordinator that's where his or her expertise and meaning comes out of. So even out of all these like little bits of music that the composer has his idea of what he's going to do, now you have a macro composer that's putting all that together, picking the final 60 to be this journey of sound, which is very eclectic but very purposeful.
Yeah. Oh, I kind of blanked on some questions I had in my head, but let's jump on something here. That's good. Okay. I like this so far. So yeah, I want to explore that topic of like connection, because I know you were talking. I can't play right now, Axel. Stop bothering me. He does this. He puts the ball on the table where we eat in the kitchen sometimes. I'm putting him on the hot seat here, and he makes you. He goes like, and we're like, oh no, we're supposed to eat here, like and he's like, no, I really, really need to play ball. To play. It's time to play, right? Yeah, it's really great. But he knows what he needs. I mean, if he gets that energy out, he'll chill after, and he's just fully, sophisticated, independent dog and member of our family. Nice. It's really cool. He knows what he wants, and he's gonna get it. He's gonna complain if he's not getting what he's supposed to get. So you were talking about how people would check mark, I guess, like certain music that they were interested in, weren't interested in. Did you ever get some kind of insight on that? Did you get to know what people would be interested? I mean, I guess you would get people to contact you about certain composers, and they were like, yeah, I really like them. Where can I find more of their music? There's consensus. Did you get some kind of consensus on, like, and did that form? How did you make decisions in the future with 60 by 60, or did that help you maybe understand the audience's perspective?
I would say the most unique thing about the project was the lack of consensus, and that straight from the beginning to the end, where I like I said, one of my pitches was, you'll love a piece and then you'll hate a piece. And I used to ask it, they would come with their checklist. Oh, I love this piece and this piece. I was like, yeah. Which piece did you hate? And they would all just laugh. And I'd be like, well, no, like, did you really, which piece did you hate? And they were like, sure, there was pieces I didn't really like with it. But you know what? I liked them all listening to it in this thing. And that's where, like, I found out is that, like, in this format, people were much more accepting. They were listening a lot more, a lot harder, and I don't want to say forgiving, but they were more open to listening to something that they wouldn't normally listen to. So, and then like the next like big question is, people were like, oh, have you seen like a genre or aesthetic or something that would pop out?
Right.
And my answer to them was always like, from year to year, there were definitely trends and flavors. We would get a lot
Mm-hmm.
of water pieces or a lot of bird pieces or um, a lot of pieces that were involving sea sound or collider or that were they would come in and out. And like another thing, we did like we did a West Coast mix and an East Coast mix and a European mix and a Southern mix and a Canadian mix. And people would be like, "Oh, did you hear difference between like the Canadian mix versus the South Pacific mix?" And I was like, "No, no." There was every once in a while there'd be like I said, a flavor, like
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of a bent and so forth. And every once in a while there'd be something like, "Oh well, maybe," and then you would do it another year,
And then no, the trend
and then it was
changes.
thrown out the window because like everything
Mm-hmm.
that was you heard the year before was in like another mix somewhere else, and this mix was concentrating on that. And the people, uh, even in the coordinators that were making their mixes, you figured that there might. Okay, so I have a very eclectic and forgiving aesthetic. So I just like there's just my ears are open. There's not a lot. There's not an aesthetic that you can probably play that I'm gonna be like no. I'm
Mm-hmm.
open to pretty much anything, but that's not everybody. But even then, I never found with 60 by 60 like something where I was like you picked all MIDI pieces or C sound pieces or something like that. No, no. 15 minutes of fame, different story. But
Mm-hmm.
but but 60 by 60 no. So yeah, it like I said, the interesting thing was its lack of consensus, and
That's
that
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting because a lot of the time people, especially just the public, might be thinking like, well, if I want to get into this style, like what should I do? Like they want someone to tell them where to go and what to do and things like. But
So
like
many
this is
composers would ask me that, like, "Oh,
yeah, I would
what are you
expect
looking
so.
for?"
Yeah,
And I said,
exactly.
and I this is my answer to every single
Uh
one of
huh.
them. So I was like, "Do what you feel
Exactly.
the best."
For you, it has to
That's
be personal. It has to be unique to you, and that's the most effective. You know,
that's what's going to
because then
send you
people
strong.
connect to you. That's the whole point. Is music connecting to who you are, not who somebody else was, and people liked him or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if for some reason you feel like you got passed over, submit again. It's 1 minute. It's not that bad. We did do a data analysis of like the submissions that came in, and um, so because there's 60 spots, um, like think about it. Even with 600 pieces, right? You have a 1 in 10 chance of getting it,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Mathematically, I guess. Yeah.
probably better than any contest. Just
Yeah, that's really nice.
just as is. And then we would do more than one mix.
Okay, so
So
a question I wanted to throw in and kind of like guide a little bit more as well
sure.
is so let's talk about also like okay, so if modern music has all these different ways of interpreting, what is it? I guess interpreting. So what would you think that like, um, where do these different themes come from? Like why was it a theme of music? Is there any way to attribute the trends to like what we're in the world? Because we're living in the world that we are, right? We're expressing always music through what we experience in life, right? Everything comes from life experiences and everything comes from ourselves.
Yeah, I'm not saying that there weren't, let's say, like there was an event. Like I guess if I did a 60 by 60 now, there would definitely be a lot of coronavirus pieces. Uh,
But
of
yeah,
which,
something connected to that, I guess. Yeah, because we are
yeah.
dealing with that. So maybe the
So there was
themes
a
would be
little.
about like closure or like being tightly closed
I mean,
off and
it would be
maybe themes
interesting to
around
do
that.
a 60 by 60 just to see what would happen. But like we had
Mm-hmm.
other like events like the big giant uh, uh, what's it? Not the monsoon, the tidal wave that happened in Indonesia.
Mhm.
We got a couple pieces for that. At the project was created in the Bush era, so we would get like a lot of like Bush response pieces. But not
Not
really.
really. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm just I wasn't the guy to be that particular, but
Hmm. Yeah, because
I
I'm just
didn't
poking
see any
around in the
trends.
dark to kind of like, because I feel like that's what we don't do enough is poking around to see where we can find even more connections. Because I think there is a little bit, and I don't know how we should introduce or talk about this, but like the whole like you know the concerts that you were running are a great way to introduce the audience to all these different genres and to
Right.
get them intrigued by composers and explore this kind of music. Um, I guess the other question I had at the end was like, what would be something you would want to change, or how would you want things to evolve going forward, and maybe even especially right now?
I always wanted to empower the composer
Mm-hmm.
and the people who facilitate composition. Uh, you know, 60 by 60 was just like in that particular thing was a natural evolution to collaborate with video and dance and stuff like that. And that and it, anyway, that just spilled out into more. Um, but yeah, so the you know composers who are writing, especially like writing pieces for musicians, they need musicians. So that was just like a natural, place to sort of empower. I think it's hard. They talk about starving artists, and starving artists is sort of a kind of a misnomer. I remember them talking about like my generation not being the starving artist, but being the artist that had the second job,
Mm-hmm.
the day job. We all were doing accounting or
Yeah.
whatever it could be, on the side, or at school or doing teaching or doing something else, and then like they would come home and compose and try to get that music out,
Mm-hmm.
almost as a hobbyist type deal and so forth. I'm not big into hobbyists, but the point was is that the composition wasn't like their main thing, and even if it was their main thing, it was like really the field itself is kind of like a desert. Like it's hard to prosper. And so I guess that would be the the thing that I would change most is just sort of to find a way to you know make it a career where you didn't
Yeah,
have
make
to
it
worry about
bigger than
getting a
just a
paycheck.
hobby.
You
Make
could
it bigger than just a second.
concentrate on like this is the music I'm
Yeah.
making. This is how that, concentrate on your art, and then here was the avenue to get that art like delivered and go through. And that would be my change.
Can you hear me?
Did you lose me?
No, I
Yeah.
hear you. I think my mic did
Yeah.
the DC thing again. So I was gonna say, all right, let's just pray it stays. Uh, yeah. Shoot, I lost track. Yeah, so it was Starving Artist and that.
So, wait,
Yeah.
so let's let's talk about future a little bit, right? So you were talking about like doing a call and like whether you have admission fees or not and so forth to trying to do kind of a dynamic live thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Competition. Yeah, thing.
so here we are, and we're in coronavirusville, and
Yeah.
you know let's be honest, the situation is obliterated concert music, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and anyway, we'll see what happens with pop music. But I don't know. Look, from what I know of pop music, they don't make the musicians don't really make a lot of money touring, and the producers are all looking to fill stadiums. So now you can't fill a stadium if you got to do it with some sort of distance, and the the payoff is going to be significantly less. Um, and it was a trend to move away from that anyway. And this is the pop field who's making like lots and lots of money. And so now, when you look into the arts, I'm not, I don't, I don't see what future there could be and so forth. So the question is sort of what's next. And like, there's a lot of art musicians that are out there looking to do stuff. So that's where I was thinking about like what's
What's
next.
next? What's next? But yeah,
No problem.
yeah, that's actually the question that I am kind of spearhead kind of thinking about a lot, and I
Right.
have been thinking a lot for a while. Um, Honestly, it's one of the reasons um, you know, it's one of the reasons I left Juilliard before graduating. I actually
Hmm.
didn't graduate. I'm an alumni officially, but I'm not a graduate.
Right.
And it's one of the reasons I decided to, stop performing and things like that. Well, one of the reasons was because I um, felt a little burnt out because I was very like I was playing competitions constantly. I was sending recordings constantly. I was going to every single music festival my mom could find. And I
Right.
was just going completely nuts with this stuff. And I did enjoy it. I still love music and I absolutely loved doing it. And I met so many people and it was just really lots of fun. And I
Right.
definitely had the abilities to play for it to be worthwhile. But I was burnt out and I did a lot more soul searching after that and a lot more kind of going in and trying to really find my voice in music and things like that. And I was trying to think about like how one of the kind of things I like to look at is let's look at the audience. When you're going to a Kennedy Center concert, most of the audience is just like the average age is 70. At
Sure.
this point, we're at the 70s. I mean, maybe 10 years ago it was 60, now it's 70, right? It's the same people going to those concerts. And it feels like we're hitting this gap of just, people who don't go to these concerts, unless they drag in their kids for the family. Yeah,
Right.
some of the parents are smart enough to, kind of understand that, this education around classical music is quite empowering and quite useful. And I mean, there's all kinds of research around the brain activity and why it's really helpful and really good to have music in your life, even if you're not going to pursue it professionally.
Right.
Um, but that was kind of really intriguing to me, and I was thinking like, pop culture, pop music, somehow they found success and we haven't. And it's not like one of them is more important or more valuable. It's just a
Right.
different music style. And
Sure.
I've always thought like there's got to be something we can do to be on the same tier. Like there really isn't a reason not to be.
Right.
Um, there is, of course, I think for sure the truth that there are going to be things in life that are more niche and things in life that are more publicly easily digestible. Let's
Well,
put
look,
it right. Of course,
if
that's
you
always going to be a thing.
if you went like 300 or 400 years ago, it was the opposite, right?
What do you mean by that?
Like, I mean, chansons and like little traveling troops that used to go from village to village to village
Uh
were
huh.
poor. Were poor, and their music is not did has not survived well.
Mm-hmm.
But Beethoven, Brahms, Mozart, they were,
Well,
you know,
true. Yeah,
they.
tastes change, the world changes, right? And
I
I
I
guess
don't know if it was taste that changed so much. It's basically more of um, the where the money is, right? Everybody's going to do music. Music people are doing people have been doing music since the caves, right? So that's always there.
Yeah.
But the question is like, where's the funding going from? And like, like hundreds of years ago, the kings and queens and so forth, they were the ones that were like footing the bill,
Right.
and that's how the money
And
was
they were
getting.
rich, so you were getting paid rich, or
That
fairly.
was how, and if you got to know the king or the queen, or you had some sort of talent or whatever, you moved up the echelon, and you didn't. But if you didn't, you played for the masses. Now, nowadays, playing for the masses is the money generator.
Yeah. Now it's
Playing for
completely flipped. It is. It is. But there wasn't a market for it. There wasn't a way to market yourself to a large audience back then. Now that we have the internet, it is way easier to do that.
right, right.
So I guess now
Exactly.
that there's that market, they just, yeah,
Well, the beginning was radio, right?
yes,
Yeah, that was
yeah.
the defining difference between like what they were.
So there is a way to look at Corona, and this epidemic that we're dealing with in a positive
Exactly.
light.
Well, that's it, and that's where I'm thinking of like the change was happening. So, but now it's upon us, catastrophism, and
We got the Noah
the
Ark. Everyone's stuck in their rooms.
so
We're
well
floating
that's
out in the water. We're looking
yeah.
for land.
So yeah, so that's the thing. So I've been
Mm.
well, so uh, my idea has been, how do you make the online performance like dynamic?
Yeah.
Um, is he going to bed? No, you're just saying knock knock. Hi, I'm talking. I'm talking with Fedora over here. We're talking about music and stuff. I'm working. You want to come? You want to come and like wave hello?
Yeah, come wave.
Okay, come here, Corey. Come on closer. You see her? Good,
Aww.
good.
Hey,
Yeah, there you are. Wave
how you
hello.
doing, buddy?
Hi.
Hey.
This is Jonah.
Hey, Jonah.
This is Jonah.
Hi, Jonah.
All right, buddy. Yeah, bud. Here, give me a kiss. All right.
Aw,
You got it, mommy?
Oh, it's Jonah.
that's super sweet. Aw,
Oh, thanks.
such a sweet kid. So you talked about how dance was very effective at one point when we were talking about, I think before at one point.
It's 60 by 60 dance. I've done other dance collaborations, but that was, I would say, the thing I've done the most.
Mm-hmm.
And so the dance was as eclectic as the music. So literally any and everything that you could think of. And dancers, I particularly, yeah, dancers are pretty ingenuitive. They, yeah, they definitely thought of a lot more things than I would have thought. I found out very quickly we needed many more parameters for dance than we did for music.
Huh. Really? Wow.
Yeah, because they definitely explore the bounds in conflict to the music and in conflict to the venue.
Mm-hmm.
Just to put it nicely.
Okay.
One of my directions or rules in 60 by 60 dance was that you can't make music. That's the composer's job. You're the dance. We're giving so.
It has to be visual, right? The
Well,
point
yeah.
of a dance is to express something visually, I guess.
Tap dance.
Well, yes, but there is a visual element to that. All dance has
Sure.
a visual element that is part of it.
But there is a definite musical element to that as well.
For sure.
Oh, and that was a hard thing to program.
Mm-hmm.
Or stomping, or vocalizations, or
They were doing very creative, like combination, like that kind of,
lots
like
of
hybrid stuff. Interesting.
Everything that you could think of, that was
Wow.
that was there. Truly, the dancers got like assignments. like they were handed the 60-second piece,
Mm.
and then they made their choreography to it, which was really anyway for me. Again, this seemed like a bit of a no-brainer. I was like, oh yeah, but we introduced a lot of choreographers and dancers to music that they have not ever heard of before.
So how do you decide that? So how do you decide parameters when your goal is to be inclusive? Like that is kind of on the very surface level, it's a very paradoxical catch 22.
Do you
But on
mean
the but on a certain,
with multimedia or with music?
I guess we can just talk about music. Yeah, let's talk
For
about just
music,
music.
it was like I said, it was easy for me
Well, you're
because
doing it, right? So it's like you
that's
know
it.
more about it.
But like when it came to, let's say, dance, right? Um, I relied on my dance coordinator. You know,
Fair enough.
it's like what I was just saying before is like it's important to have like a team that like runs
Yeah.
the dance choreographers that I worked with, the dance coordinators. Um, they understood parameters. They were like the first things that they would always go to me. They're like, "What are the entrances and exits?" And I was like,
Oh, that's the
uh,
thing involved in this. Oh,
"Yeah." I was
right.
like, "I don't, I don't know." And they're like, "Well, we need to know. We need."
Uh-huh.
I mean, like I knew the dance, like how big the space was and all that. Like that. Like anyway, I'm thinking music guy, right? Theater, like it's like that, but like entrances
Yeah,
and
but this is
exits
the
are
same
just like
thing with the whole like excerpt versus like a finished, rounded out work, right? Similar, I guess dancers have to worry about that too.
so that was so they were the ones that like set those parameters of which like you would uh
Okay.
well so there's always two hats, right? The I always wear a lot of hats, right?
Well,
But
it is.
so
Oh,
one is the leader of the 60 by 60 project, the producer, the big guy on top that's throwing it all together. Then there's like the music director. So it's like the music guy that's doing all that. I'm just like, well, here's the works, here's the CD. I'll make the MP3s. I'll do this. I'll do like that, all that. Like again, like
mm,
we're basically dealing with 16-bit sound for CD and whatever. That's so that it was all on the CD in the beginning. So that's how it was. And then I realized as soon as we were working for dancers, like everything had to be MP3s, because that's what they're consuming. That's they're putting it on their iPods and they're practicing their pieces and stuff like that. So
yeah.
like that was that, and I would do all that. So then I was kind of like totally subservient to the dancers. Like whatever you need, whatever you want, I'll do.
Yeah, yeah.
There was stuff that just couldn't be done, and there was stuff that like in one mix we had a pole dancer,
Mm-hmm.
and the challenge was how you get that pole on and off the stage.
Yeah, that's a tricky one.
It was a tricky one, and it was this close to getting cut because it was too difficult. And anyway,
Interesting.
that was my role to solve.
Yeah, because it has to be extremely solid, and usually it's attached to the ceiling, but in a stage you don't have that ceiling. Yeah,
It had to be a portable thing to come on and off the
with
stage.
weight probably, right, and all this.
It weighed. It was really heavy. I know because I helped carry it out.
Yeah. Yeah, because if it's not heavy, that thing will topple while she's doing this whole inertia moves. So,
So I'm
what's
going. Okay,
happening Sunday? Introduce us a
so
little to it, for people who
yeah.
are
I mean,
here.
I'm talking about 60 by 60 dance,
Uh-huh.
and just just what it is and like what we've done. Some of the highlights. Composer's voice, where that started, how it is, and how that came by.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, for I have some music from 60 by 60 Dance in London with like a montage of pictures of those dancers, which is anyway they were fabulous. The dancers in London were fabulous, and for Composer's Voice, I have a work by me, um, but being performed by Matthew McCright, who we just he received his Carnegie debut, Composer's Voice at Carnegie just last November, Then we're going to do 15 minutes of fame. I'll talk a little bit about, again, just like now, is about where it came from, what it does, and the point of that project. There, I have a video of another one of my works from Maria. I'm not going to botch her name. Maria. She's a fantastic flutist. And so I have a piece from her. And then, you know, if I got to keep practicing, but I got to practice a little bit more to, so compositions, you know, I show my chamber musics and some of you know, my electronic works I do. And so one of the things I also do is throat singing, where I'll, you know, do a little piece.
We'll hear some of that.
I did for that. And then yeah, and then, you know, hopefully I'll have this piece of this spin-off of 15 Minutes of Fame type deal for live streaming.
Yeah, that would be really cool. And having all this variety is going to be, I think, extremely exciting and
we'll see.
diverse.
And I'm hoping we'll see how it goes. I'm trying to, so all the people that we have, like, you know, in the hopper for coming up in the next month or so, I'm telling them that they have to, like, listen in and ask questions. So
I think we are taking questions.
Good.
I think we are.
And yeah, I mean, look, however it goes is how it goes. But, like, I'm hoping that, like, you know, it'll give them an opportunity to sort of test the waters for what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah.
And, you know, and maybe ask a few questions for feedback, or, like, and be able to see it and so forth. So there we go.
Cool. Yeah, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having
very
me.
Insightful and very very fun to explore things with you, for sure.
Oh,
and having
I
someone
I thank you for letting me go off your ear. I mean, like, I've been stuck indoors, so
and
you know, when I get a chance to talk to somebody.
And having someone that is, like, open-minded, that's in your profession and in your kind of, like, very unique apex of music that you're involved in. Having somebody that's very open-minded like that and very, you know, looking to connect that music to the audiences in the world, I think is really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. Thanks for everyone who's watching. See you guys.
Bye.